Lots of
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am Hodey.
I'm Lou.
And I'm Brian.
And this is Enemy of My Enemy, where we talk about things from a left, right, and center libertarian perspective. My apologies to everybody on Twitch. Apparently, we're not allowed to go live there because we're not allowed to use the word atomic bomb in a title. So, I'm going to try to edit that real quick when it comes to it. Today, we're discussing the efficacy of dropping the atomic bomb on Japan in World War II. Brian has graciously agreed to fight 2-on-1 here, or 1-on-2, and be the pro-atomic bomb guy. He's wrong, but I like him. There's a lot to take in on this. This is one I actually, when I found out we were talking about this, I listened to an audiobook. I downloaded a lot of articles, and it's not simple. There are libertarians, or at least ex-libertarians like Austin Peterson, that favored the atomic bomb to drop. It's certainly a minority sentiment, but it certainly exists within libertarian spaces. And of course, outside of libertarian spaces, it is about a 50-50 split on whether it was a good idea or not. And so it's good to be able to discuss these things. We just had the anniversary of, I hate it when they say anniversary because I think celebration when I hear it. And so when somebody's like, it's the anniversary of the nuclear bombing draft, I'm like, oh, no, I don't, that's not, I'm okay with forgetting that one. There's most anniversaries you don't want to forget. That one probably not so much. But yeah, there's a lot of different things to say about it. Brian actually is educated about it, has some strong feelings. Lou actually has personal experience with this, or at least with the fallout from this.
Totally there. I look really good for my age.
Yeah.
Radiation.
Your personal input on the entire thing. Yeah. Lou Oppenheimer. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot to go, and so I'm just gonna let everybody give their feelings about it. Lou, we'll sandwich Brian a little bit. Lou, I will let you deliver what you have to say about it. Then we'll turn to Brian, and I'll finish this up there. So, Lou, go ahead and give us your thoughts from a lefty point of view. How you feel about the U.S. government dropping a nuclear bomb on Japan?
It was a shit idea. The end. No. Okay, so many of you may know, some of you may not know, I actually grew up in Tokyo. So my whole middle school and high school, and I was a cheerleader and all of this. And one of the when we would go for away games, like our football team would go, we would travel. And one of the schools that we played against was Sasebo, which is in Nagasaki Prefecture, is right there. And I've had multiple occasions to go to Nagasaki and see everything. As someone who lived a few hours away, it was something we did actually quite often. I think every year we did like a field trip with the school, and we went to like the Peace Museum and things like that, and different sites in the area. I did not make it to Hiroshima, although many of my friends did. I wasn't able to go on that trip. I think that was our senior year. And, it's a lot of the same kind of stuff. And so I chose to come to this discussion today from more of a, as a true lefty, from more of a feelings and experience place, because I know you two have probably researched it and know all kinds of like math numbers and stuff that I'm not going to know. But what I can tell you from growing up in Japan, and I had sort of this weird double exposure because I was educated on a military base. So it was an American curriculum. But we also, being in Japan, we had a lot of influence in our curriculum from the locals and things like that. And I also did summer school programs at the University of Tokyo. And so I've had a lot of really interesting conversations with people whose families were there, their grandparents were there, or, things like that, or who had grown up in the area after It had happened, and today it's really fascinating because if you look back at old pictures of the devastation, and then you go to Nagasaki now, it's incredible to see how they have rebuilt and the community that they have. But the two big things that I have noticed is from an education standpoint. We all know kind of what they teach us in America about, what we did. We saved the world and we ended World War II, and this was a wonderful thing. And it's so glorifying of it. But then when you go to school in Japan and what you're taught is actually it's sad but very humbling in so many ways, because the way it is taught in Japanese schools is that this is a thing that happened because, like, as a result of the terrible things that the Japanese government and the emperor and all this were doing at the time, and that it was sort of we kind of deserved it. Like, they don't outright say that, but it was it's very humbling to them. It's like, we were doing some really bad shit and they smacked our hand and that sort of thing, which I find really fascinating, because also coming from a military background, we look at other countries, particularly, something that's relevant right now in the Middle East, where we have been at war and caused all this devastation and death. And we've basically created more terrorists in the effort to fight terror. But Japanese culture is so, so incredibly different. That their response to it was not to become radicalized, but rather to sort of take a step back and look at themselves and go, okay, let's change what we're doing. Like, obviously this isn't working. Like, we poked the bear, right? I mean, everybody knows the line. Oh, we poked the bear. And that was a bad idea. From a moral standpoint, and as sort of a pacifist and a peace-loving hippie, the fact that we did it at all, and the number of children and civilians and all that were killed in a horrific way, and then the people in the community after the fact that have dealt with long-term issues from radiation and all these things. It's awful, and it never should have happened. I know one of the big arguments is, statistically, if you look at the numbers and this trend would have continued to go this way or that way, more people would have died if the war would have continued. So by this one big sacrifice, in the long run, we actually saved a lot of lives. And while that sounds great on paper, and I really am, I'm a data person in a lot of ways. However, taking a life is not a data point. Like, it's so much more than that, and that's not okay. I'm sure there were 1,000,001 other options to end the war, stop, do something, right? This is never the answer. Nuclear weapons should not exist. It's horrifying to me that they even exist at all. That said, I kind of want to quick caveat, that doesn't mean that I am against nuclear power. Yay, green energy. And responsible green energy. But I don't know, to see it live, and sorry, I'm getting some strange feedback and I don't know where that's coming from. It's gone now. And it's back.
And now it's back. Hodey, is that you? Sorry.
I don't believe so.
It's odd.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it's me. Hang on, let me fix my mic.
I think he's playing a video or something in the background.
Right.
Or something like that.
That's so odd.
But go ahead and continue.
Sorry. It was just kind of throwing me off. I couldn't think what I was thinking, as all I was hearing in my head was that. Yeah, so I guess from a personal experience, it's sad and heartbreaking to see what these people have gone through. since that happened. I think that's something that really is missing in American public education is we hear about, the bomb was dropped and the war ended and boop, that's it. Like we aren't taught in the United States what happened in Japan, in Nagasaki and Hiroshima after that, and how the people rebuilt and the things that they dealt with health wise and security wise and all of that. And there was a lot going on at the time between Japan and China and Japan and Korea, and Japan was doing some pretty terrible shit and it needed to be stopped. Absolutely. I ultimately in the long run, where Japan is today and the culture and the people, I think it's wonderful. That's home to me. That's my culture. Like I still feel like a foreigner in a lot of ways here in the US because my culture and what I know is Japan. And we're, it's a very polite society. They're very forgiving and loving and kind and just generous and all these wonderful, wonderful things. But that was something that's always been ingrained in the culture of Japanese people before and since. So, just as Trisha said, like the option to burn children's skin off is not an option. That's never okay. I think we would have gotten here another way. I really do. Because the culture there is what it is, we would have gotten there another way. We didn't need it.
Yeah, appreciate your thoughts there. Does my mic sound okay now? Do I sound okay?
Your
There's a
mic
little
is
bit
fine. There's just like a background noise.
Yeah.
It's like it's like an office in the background or something.
You know what it reminds me of is the old party lines when you could kind of hear somebody else talking on the phone.
And they're listening.
Right? Are we old? Are we that old? People are probably watching this going, what the hell is a party line?
Yeah,
back when we had phones plugged into the walls.
Yeah.
Why they're plugged into the wall. We have to charge them every night. What's the big deal? Why is that a big deal?
You couldn't unplug them from the walls. Sorry, go ahead.
It's tough being a millennial. You got like the 80s music is now classic rock, and I'm just like,
I heard Green Day. Green Day on the classic rock station, and I lost my shit.
I have officially I freaked out a little bit today. Today is the 30th anniversary of Metallica's Black Album. It was released 30 years ago today.
Yes, it was.
I remember when I first heard it where I was sitting in my buddy's apartment in college back in 1991. And I went, that was 30 years ago. I'm old.
Ouch.
That hurts. That
hurt a lot.
All right, Brian, well, give us some more pain. Go give us your thoughts from a right-wing perspective on the nuclear bombs. Go ahead.
Lou, from a perspective, I would have loved to have seen the war end without dropping nuclear bombs. I would love a world where nuclear bombs don't exist. The reality, though, is they do exist. They were going to exist kind of no matter what we did. The research had already been started. Was it accelerated by World War II? Obviously. It was completely intentional that they wanted to make a bomb. And that afterwards went, hey, we can do really other cool stuff with it, which is what we want. But the questions start becoming, did the war end because of the bomb? That's number one. Number two, how does the war end without it? Let's say there's a problem and they say, you know what, we can't make this work for another year or two, which was a possibility. That's why they did the Trinity test, was to make sure, because they weren't sure that they could make it work. And the third question then, of course, is which is worse? So we have to understand what was going on in the world at that time. I mean, we had VE Day, we had defeated Hitler, and we were looking at possibly doing the same with Japan. But Japan's a different animal altogether. Japan is not Germany. It's not mostly landlocked. It's an island nation with very steep cliffs, very easily defendable steep cliffs. let's go back a little bit in time here on what happened before then. We have two battles for you: a Battle of Saipan and the Battle of Okinawa. Both took place before the bombs were dropped, obviously. In the Battle of Saipan, there were 32,000 Japanese soldiers on the island. 24,000 were killed, and 5,000 committed suicide. That leaves you with 3,000. So they killed 90% of the soldiers on there. Now, that number is nowhere near the number that we were experiencing when we were going through Europe with Italy and Germany. Even with conscripts and things like that, those numbers were nowhere near a 90% kill rate, which, trust me, the Pentagon was not happy about that. In Okinawa, that number changes a little bit. There were about 77,000 Japanese soldiers on the island. 77,000 about 166 soldiers were killed on the Battle of Okinawa. 30,000 Okinawa conscripts, those were people that were drafted into the army, were also killed. And pretty much, it comes to a grand total with civilians and everything else of over 110,000 dead. Now, that's 100% kill ratio on the soldiers, and about another 40,000 people that were dragged into it, along with the stories of people jumping off cliffs because they didn't want to be captured by the Americans because it did go against their beliefs at the time. So this is what set up everything for what was coming on the home islands, which, by the way, was the big part of it. Everybody's taking a look and saying that they were going to have to invade Japan. And that in and of itself, and these are two islands that are really not even considered home. Okinawa's got its own ethnicity to it, and it's, even though it's part of Japan, it's kind of like, and Lou, you can probably say it better than I can. It's more like, I want to say Puerto Rico. Trish, I'm going to get to you in a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but the reality is that it was not how, this is what we were looking at going into. The conservative casualty numbers for the U.S. invading Japan were 500,000 soldiers, 500,000 U.S. soldiers. Now, you can say, Brian, that's a simple price to pay, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. Okay, I get that. The estimates on the number of Japanese soldiers that were going to be killed in this invasion comes anywhere between 10 and 15 million, plus another 15 million civilians. So we're talking in the neighborhood of 30 million Japanese out of 100 million Japanese, 30% of their country being killed in this battle to take back the islands. This is what we were looking at. The Japanese were not about to surrender before the bomb. Were they looking at fighting to the bitter end? Yes, there are plenty of details, messages, memos, everything else that says they were going to fight to the bitter end. And in fact, we're still fighting internally until the bitter end, until the emperor called it. And not only did his recordings for the surrender, which, by the way, those two recordings were almost lost during the coup that took place in between the time that they were trying to surrender, until he had to finally do the second recording, which says it is an unconditional surrender. Now, we can get into the details of it, and it's unfortunate what happened, but this was the most effective and efficient way, and I know people are cringing on me saying that, but the numbers really kind of play out. Do you accept 500,000 people being killed, or do you accept 30 million? If you say, I'm good with the 30 million because, it's battle and stuff like that, where are your moral values? Because you're killing 30% of a population of a country. So the reality is things were not looking very good if this war was going to be an invasion. And the bombs clearly accelerated and ended the war very quickly, something that everybody in the region needed to have happen.
Cool. Well, Brian, thank you for your thoughts. I got a bit of a different take here. I did write down all my thoughts, and I timed them out to about 10 minutes. So let me get started here.
I'll go take a nap.
All right, take a nap. Wake me when you're done. All right. So from the Japanese hierarchy to the American politicians, it was widely known that Germany's invasion of the USSR on June 22nd, 1945 would soon knock Japan out of the war. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a statement that declared, quote, "If at any time the USSR should enter the war, all Japanese will realize that absolute defeat is inevitable," unquote. Truman wrote in his own diary on July 17th that Japanese Emperor Hirohito was prepared to concede by August 15th. On August 12th, 1945, less than 1 month before the nuclear bomb was dropped on August 6th, Ambassador Naotaki Sato went to a diplomatic meeting in Moscow and submitted terms of surrender for the Japanese forces. These terms included reparations for the damages done, the forfeiture of several Pacific islands, and an end to all hostilities. Indeed, an intercepted conversation revealed that there was only one reason the peace talks didn't work out, and that reason was that America and her allies demanded that Hirohito be tried and executed for war crimes. Emperor Hirohito was an awful person, and the discovery of his own personal conversations reveals that he was not, as some people say he was, a peaceful man held captive by his cabinet. While he was somewhat hesitant to enter the war, he had decided by the end of it to truly make it his war and push the offensive. Sanctions would not have worked against Hirohito. He did not surrender after the first bomb was detonated because these deaths were largely civilian casualties. It made no difference to him. He didn't surrender after the second nuke targeting civilians for the same reasons. In fact, he didn't surrender until September 2nd of that year, and it had nothing to do with the nukes at all. The Japanese military surrendered after the invasion of Manchuria by the USSR. Another missive details exactly how little difference the nuclear bombs made on their decision. On August 13th, well after both bombs had been dropped, Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki explained, quote, "The Soviet Union will not only take Manchuria, Korea, Karafuto, but also Hokkaido. This will destroy the foundation of Japan. We must end the war when we can deal with the United States," indicating that the nuclear bombs were an annoyance that could be stood up against, but the loss of these tactical territories to the USSR could not be tolerated. American propaganda attempted to hide this fact. But even on a plaque in Washington, D.C. that commemorates the bombings, it reads, quote, "The vast destruction wreaked by the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the loss of 135,000 people made little impact on the Japanese military. However, the Soviet invasion of Manchuria changed their minds," end quote. Even to this day, the words on that plaque are altered on the military's website to make it appear as though the nuclear bombs were the deciding factors. This was all confirmed on the American side as well. Truman's diary reveals that with surrender imminent, he had to hurry up to drop the bombs. The bombs had nothing to do with weakening Japanese morale by murdering their families. It had everything to do with showing off to the world that making them afraid of America's to make them afraid of America's new weapon. The terms of surrender that we accepted on September 2nd were even less charitable than the submitted terms that we already had on the table. Hirohito was never tried and executed. That was simply an excuse. Within a few years, he would actually be a regular guest at America's White House, visiting the USA several times before his death in 1989. Of the 8 five-star generals, 7 of them came forward to state that the nuclear bombs were unnecessary and exacerbated violence in the region. MacArthur thought the use of atomic bombs was inexcusable. He later wrote to former President Hoover that if Truman had followed Hoover's wise and statesmanlike advice to modify its surrender terms and tell the Japanese they could keep their emperor, quote, "The Japanese would have accepted it, and gladly, I have no doubt." Eisenhower said, quote, "The Japanese were ready to surrender, and it wasn't necessary to hit them with that awful thing," unquote. Fleet Admiral William Leahy wrote that the use of this barbarous weapon at Hiroshima and Nagasaki was of no material assistance in our war against Japan. The Japanese were already defeated and ready to surrender. In being the first to use it, we had adopted an ethical standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Ages. The deaths of Hiroshima and Nagasaki dwarf what was done at 9/11. But we tell ourselves that it is all right because our murderers dressed up in nice suits and spoke English, while their murderers wore shaggy beards, wore turbans, and lived in caves. 150,000 people were wiped off the face of the earth in an instant. 100,000 more deaths would follow during the fallout. This does not even touch on the millions of lives that wound up with lifelong deformities and burns due to radiation. One might say that the nuclear bombs were an end that justifies the means. Except it's clear to me that historically speaking, what happened to Japan wasn't even a means to an end. It did not contribute to the war's end. It led to something else entirely. Leahy's position is that in a moment, we adopted a new standard, that killing innocent people because the government claims it is necessary became the way of military life going forward. And how prophetic are his words now? We excuse bombing weddings because it's better to kill loads of innocent civilians so long as the terrorists are afraid. Even still, by our own calculations, military operations kill 9 innocent people to every 1 actual target. This policy became acceptable beginning with the nuking in Japan. We currently distribute weapons to terrorists that are killing 3 times the quantity of people that died in the Holocaust, all because of some justified end that never seems to end. My natural inclination is to go economic when we have this discussion. Indeed, we should remember that the capitalists predicted that this is what would happen after countries adopted Keynesian economics. Indeed, in 1949, the very year of this horrible act, it was the first year that the United States had changed its economic equations to coincide with Keynes. This is no accident. Market goods are creationary or protective, and for them to be destructive absolutely requires complete ignorance of market demand. It requires government intervention. This cannot be understated, and perhaps at a different time I can go into why the capitalists were able to predict with 100% clarity that war would be the result of embracing Keynesian ideas. But let me conclude my thoughts by making a moral argument. Let us say that I ignore all this evidence and say that my opponents are correct. I'll play make-believe and say that murdering 250,000 people saved millions of more lives. Let us say that Japan would have never surrendered until every serviceman was dead and an American flag flew above Tokyo. I would still oppose the bombing. Giving the government the authority to make such a decision, even if it is a mathematically correct decision, does not ensure that the government will be mathematical about it going forward. How many unethical laws do we have now that were passed because of one instance where it was right? They use a crisis, propose a solution that would have alleviated the crisis, and then apply that solution to our every way of life, even after these crises have faded. The idea that government will only tactfully murder civilians to save more people is not only historically inaccurate, but it is wildly immoral. Nobody should have such power, and if they do, surrendering that power is the right thing to do in the long term. People with such power do not give up. Being right once does not mean it will be right forever, and the government has and will continue to kill innocent people because of the decision we made on August 6, 1945. We frame this argument as the trolley problem. Some must die, some more can live. But when we surrender to the government control of the trolley, the tracks, and the people, they are incentivized to create nothing but endless trolley problems to justify their own heinous acts. As the greatest military commander of all time, Commander Shepard once said, "Killing innocent people doesn't end wars, it starts them." Indeed, as we look back on the years since 1945, opening the box of killing innocent people has led to so many wars that even the people fighting in them can't keep track. Even if the war ended on one front, which it did not, it opened 1,000 other fronts. Killing innocent people is now a daily routine for our government. If we can swallow the use of the atomic bomb, then there is truly no pill that we cannot swallow. As a libertarian, I draw a lot of lines that government should never cross, no matter how good its intentions appears to be. Killing innocent people en masse is so far beyond that line that I cannot fathom how my philosophy would even entertain the idea. Call it the cold calculus of war if you must, but this calculus of war does not permit the persistence of peace. Like so many graphs in calculus, it is endless. To use mathematical terminology, it has no limit. Government has a way of turning what was supposed to be limited into the unlimited. Libertarians must deal with unlimited governments in every way of life, but when it takes a vector that approaches taking infinite lives, there is no greater atrocity that we can suffer. In the long run, we'd have been better off and safer had we dropped food, medicine, and loving notes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on those fateful days. But we chose death instead of life, and predictably, our politicians have chosen death every day since then. I condemn the dropping of the atomic bomb through every lens that I can look at it through. My mind tells me that it wasn't logical or necessary, and my heart tells me it wasn't compassionate or good. If liberty and justice are for all, then they must also be for the mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters who on August 6, 1945, looked up from their grocery store parking lots, classrooms, office cubicles, and dinner tables, unknowingly witnessing the last day of their lives. Liberty and justice for some doesn't have the same ring to it, especially when it is the politicians that get to decide who those some might be. And that's how I feel about it. And I understand that there's I understand differences of opinion, but for me, I feel so strongly on this that I have a tough time.
You got about 4 errors in there, but we will go there through it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. With your moral thing is just stuck with me a little bit. Number one, Truman was well aware of what had to be done with that. Now, Truman could have said, looking back at it, he could have said maybe there was a different way, but unfortunately, there really was not. Let's rewind a little bit in the war. What happened with the firebombing of Tokyo and how many people were killed with that, with the napalm bombing that took place? Which, by the way, if you know that LeMay, I believe it was, that didn't want to fly in that bombing raid because he thought it was inhumane to drop napalm on residential buildings, which is what happened. I kind of agree with him on that. But I still want to know how the war ends without the bomb. That's the number one question. Are you telling me that we should have dropped food on there? Okay, how are you going to transfer food to a country that's already starving, by the way, which is the piece that you've left out, unfortunately, has had, by the way, all of their harbors and mines by, what was the name of that operation they did to mine the harbors? Oh, yeah, Operation Starvation, which knocked out 90% of shipping going into Japan. The rice harvest had already crumpled. Their oil was almost down to zero, and they were still getting ready to fight to the bitter end. So, Hodey, please tell me exactly how this was going to change any differently. How was the emperor, who was not at all willing to surrender until after the first bomb was dropped, and even then, his war council still put out feelers to say that they wanted to not only be held not responsible for war crimes, they were willing to surrender and give up islands and things like that. But the war council and the emperor would still remain in power.
Well, according to them, it didn't make a difference. You killed a bunch of their civilians. If you've mentioned they didn't care to feed him, they didn't care to keep him alive.
Okay,
so it didn't matter.
Okay, so we should have accepted those terms and left him in power.
If it says you kill your one guy, or else we will kill 250,000 of your guys, then. But yeah, sure.
They weren't killing the emperor. Nobody was trying to kill the emperor. You didn't see the Japanese people rising up to go up against the emperor. In fact, they were being conscripted to fight in foreign wars.
All right, Bushido, yeah.
Okay, so once again, Soviets enter the war. They go through Manchuria. By the way, most of the army at that point had withdrawn back to the home islands for the big final defense of the home islands that was coming up. So they were killing about 250,000 a month, I believe it was, in Manchuria during that time frame. About, 19 million Chinese were killed during the entire war by Japan. So once again, someone who has killed just as many, if not just as many people as Hitler did, you're okay with leaving them in power, leaving his generals in power, and starving the nation. I mean, just please tell me how that's going to be different than the bombing.
Sure.
Or better. Please tell me it's better than the bombing.
Sure. People see America in a different light. Instead of seeing us as villains to be fought against, they see us as they begin to realize the cracks around what the emperor's propaganda has been, right? Their entire machine. Being that we are monsters, and if we prove that we are not monsters, then there's cracks there. This is what happened in Cuba. This has happened in other countries as well.
But hang on.
Sure.
We were broadcasting messages every 15 minutes, dropping leaflets, and it was having zero effect. This is going on before the atomic bombs were being dropped. This was being done during the Tokyo bombing, firebombing. This was being done during every raid. We had Japanese prisoners who were translating for us, verifying the translating right, and we are dropping millions of leaflets over every major city, and there was no rebellion against the emperor at any point in time.
Well, words are cheap. I mean, like I said, it's not just messaging, although that's part of it, is education.
You just said that they would see us as awesome because we stopped bombing. Now, they're blockaded. They've got mines in every harbor, sinking almost 90% of anything that goes in. No food's going in. Their harvests have crumpled. They have no oil to transport the food. How exactly is starving that entire country who is not rising up against their emperor going to be better?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how me giving them food is starving them. Help. Like what?
No, how are you?
What's the argument there?
How are you going to feed logistically 100 million people with airplanes, B-29s, which by the way have probably about a maximum capacity of 20,000 pounds?
Well, I mean, you know what? We try, and if we can't, at least they see that we tried.
Okay,
If we can sneak a plane over there with nuclear bombs, we can sneak a plane over there to drop food crates.
So you drop 20,000 pounds. Let's say we drop 20,000 pounds of rice. Okay, this now becomes a logistical issue. You drop 20,000 pounds of rice. Okay, you fly it over there. You drop it. What happens if they shoot you down? Because, by the way, they were still shooting down reconnaissance planes, weather planes, everything else that was coming around, leaflet planes. And, oh, by the way, we still don't talk about the entire, what was it, 5% of all of the Army Air Force deaths were due to malfunctioning equipment. So you had a decent, better than zero chance on takeoff of dying carrying that food to the country that's trying to shoot you down.
Well, we protected that nuke pretty well, didn't we? Both of them?
No, actually, the only reason we didn't at the time is because we had knocked out a good chunk of their Air Force. But
and not even that.
Yeah.
But only three out of the, what was it, 12 people on board knew what their mission even was, or really told me where they were going.
That's pretty standard, actually, because the whole idea of loose lips to sink ships was the mentality
even once they were in the air.
Yes. Yeah, they do. Even
okay, growing up military, believe me, and having been married to a military man who's been deployed, like, I completely understand OPSEC. Okay, been there, done that. But there's also some sneaky ass bullshit when you're putting young guys up in a plane and going, I'm not going to tell you what you're going to do. And then when they land, go, oh, by the way, you just murdered a shit ton of people.
Okay.
Like, what kind of mental,
let me ask you a question. What's the difference between the bombers who went out and bombed residential neighborhoods with napalm? What's the difference? These guys knew what they were going into, that there was a chance they were going to die doing the mission, and that what they were doing was killing people. And
if they went in knowing what they were doing, that's on them. That was their choice to follow that order.
But they got into it. They knew there was a big bomb on board, and they knew they were flying. They weren't told it was a weather reconnaissance mission. They told that it was a bombing mission with a new weapon. That's all it was. They weren't told the scale of it, because honestly, we're talking about 1940s technology and 1940s OPSEC. So it's again, we get back to this thing. Yes, we can criticize for them not telling them what the bomb was on board and what the expected damage was going to be, what the risks they took. But those pilots and those air crews knew kind of what they were getting into. The next question is getting back to Hodey. How do you feed that country when it is blockaded? They are still shooting down and attacking our boats. How do you feed that country and say that we're awesome in feeding you? Plus the logistics of getting all that food to 100 million people and making sure it gets to the right people. What happens when you drop that food? What happens with Ethiopia? We were dropping millions of tons of food into Ethiopia. Where did that food go to? Didn't go to the starving people, went to the people with guns who went, hey, you know what? I'd like to keep a couple of bags of these rice, or I'd like to sell them.
Right. Funny how we can be accurate when we want to be. We're dropping the bomb, and then it's like, oh, we're really accurate with that. But
hang on here. Hang on. Whoa.
Sure.
You're dropping logistics in a bomb. A bomb, you want it to break. Okay, you want it to be at a certain point, and you want it to go boom, or you want it to do what it's supposed to do. Dropping logistics is completely different, and we're talking 1940s infrastructure here. We're not talking a C-130 coming in, dropping a parachute skid. We're talking from 8, 12, 15, 20,000, 30,000 feet up, trying to drop precision on a guy who's looking through a glorified microscope to try to get it to land in a certain area. You know, the bomb's, radius that they were working on was measured in like half mile, which, yes, it's an atomic bomb, so it doesn't have to be that close, but you're going to do that with a pallet of food?
Sure.
Oops, sorry, we dropped it in the ocean. Oops, sorry, we dropped it into the giant fire that was right there. We dropped it into an inhospitable part of the country, which, by the way, there's a lot of inhospitable parts in Japan, right?
Oops, sorry, we dropped a nuke on your child. I'll go with the oops, we dropped the rice in the ocean.
Okay, that's fine. Then you're good.
All of a sudden,
with
we're
killing-
stupid
you're
and
good
accurate with rice.
You
right?
are good with starving. You're good with making Yemen look like your kids not getting McDonald's last night, because that's what was going to happen in Japan. Either we were invading or starving them out. Now, if you feel better that those kids didn't get vaporized, but that millions more died because, well, we didn't vaporize them. Hey, you know what? Hey, I feel better. Then that's your ethical issue. But from everybody that's involved in the war, everybody that was looking at being in Europe and having to go fight in Japan, including my grandfather, I got news for you. It was a godsend that those 2 bombs came in and ended the war, because the notes that you have, Hodey, that you referenced, I hate to say this, are incorrect. Okay, the emperor was willing to surrender. Okay, I've got show notes here too, so we can put them up there and you can compare the time frames.
Sure.
The emperor was willing to surrender conditionally. He was left in power. His war cabinet was left in power. They were going to not be tried for war crimes. Now, if you give that same deal, you give that same deal to Hitler. Anyone?
Oh, to end like the Holocaust and stuff. Like,
Yeah, you give the same
Hitler
deal to
will
Hitler.
stop. Yeah, if he gets to stay in power and he stops killing people, yes.
Okay, what if he doesn't stop killing people? He just kills all the people inside his country.
Here's the thing, though. We didn't nuke Germany.
Oh, we were about to. We would have. If let's say the war goes on another 6 months, we probably would have nuked Berlin. The only reason that was not considered was because, Trinity occurred after VE Day.
I'm not going to kill 250,000 innocent people to kill one guilty person.
It wasn't 250,000. It was okay. So you're okay then with the invasion of the home islands and about 45,000 prisoners of war being killed by the Japanese the second we set foot.
I would not have invaded, I guess.
That's fine. You don't invade. So you're okay with starvation then?
No.
I'm
talking about trying to feed them, and you're assuming that all my rice crates land in the ocean. So I guess
we're talking 100 million people. Okay? You serve 100 people. What are the logistics involved?
That's an assumption based on a trajectory, based on a formula, assuming we know what the future ration,
based on war rations in Japan at the time and how they were declining. They were in some cases less than 700 calories per day.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm not denying
now
that.
My fat butt could definitely use that.
We knew exactly what the future was and that there were 0 other options.
Okay, so it's okay to starve them because that's what
we weren't the ones starving them, though.
I control my conscience. I can't control somebody else's conscience. I take responsibility for the 250,000.
Okay, so it is. So we've got it on both of you on here saying that I would not have nuked it because those people were killed, but I'm okay to watch them starve to death.
I mean, if you're assuming that every one of my rice crates ends up in the ocean, I guess
I'm gonna say everyone makes it. Every single one makes it. Every single one. Logistically, how much rice can you deliver?
You know what? I can keep trying, and really, because I'm a non-interventionalist, I am not even saying that this would be a government operation.
You're losing 5% of your air crews.
When I was a single mom, 5%. Barely 5%. And lost my job and had to try to feed my kid, and there were times I was hungry. I should have stepped back and thought, damn, I can't feed my family, so we should just bomb the house. It doesn't make any sense to me.
This is, hang on here. You live in probably the greatest country it's ever been in society. Some of you may debate that, okay? But realistically, think about this. We are in most cases, don't get me wrong, there are things that we are terrible on. Trust me on this. But you have food banks, you have food shelters, you have shelters that are all around. This is Imperial Japan 1945. There is no 7-Eleven. There is no food shelter. There is nothing. This is Ethiopia. This is the Sudan. This is Yemen. These are all these countries that are going through starvation, and that there is no logistical way to feed them effectively. I want to hear how you are going to feed these people without saying we're just going to feed them. because there's no logistical way you can.
I've never assumed that we could. I never
Okay.
assumed it was necessarily our responsibility, the same as I don't assume that it is my responsibility as an American to feed all of the hungry Americans. I provide what I can when I can, just the same as Hodey is saying. But like, I don't make the assumption that it is my responsibility to feed a whole bunch of people in another country. But I also know that, like, well, if I'm not going to feed them, I might as well blow them up. Like, it's just two totally separate things that just don't equate to me. It doesn't.
Okay, so
I can't make that connection.
It's not my problem, I think, is what I can just get. Let me know if I'm wrong here. That they started a war. We got it up to them. We went, see ya. You guys, whatever happens, happens. That's in your border. That's your responsibility. Have a good day. Is that the end of the war for you?
I mean, end of the war, no, because they're out there picking fights.
Okay, but
there's.
What do you do then? Do you because, by the way, in between all of this, the war was still going on. It wasn't like we dropped 2 bombs and went, everybody take a break. I mean, they did slow down in some bombing sorties.
Oh yeah, of course. Like nobody.
But they still.
Only Biden assumes that when you do something, it stops instantly.
Yeah, but the thing is this, is that when the emperor broadcast, I mean, there were still pockets of resistance, just like in Germany, just like in Japan, that fought until the bitter end because they wanted to. But there were a lot of them that had to hear that second recording of Hirohito saying unconditional surrender, essentially. And I'm paraphrasing this. Trish, we'll talk later. You know what? And I'm sorry. That's just one that's just gonna, anyhow. And I've lost my train of thought now on that.
I'm sorry, I did too.
I mean, like, here's my thing. I'm trying to say what I would.
If I'm a baby murderer, then go for it, because you know what? In the end, the reality is, I'm not saying the means justify the end or the end justifies the means. What I am saying is, looking at a shitty situation, which everybody signed off on at the time, history has proven that the invasion of the Soviet Union was, while helpful, did not end the war. What ended the war was Hiroshima being bombed, and then the second bomb coming after the War Council, which, by the way, couldn't meet. Do you remember that, Hodey, when reading through your stuff? The War Council wasn't able to meet for a couple of days between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In fact, they got the notice about the bombing of Nagasaki because the War Council never met because one of them was too busy. He had other things to take care of. So the War Council never met after the first atomic bomb until just before the Nagasaki bomb fell. And then while they were in the meeting, they found out, oh, by the way, they just bombed Nagasaki.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, that same War Council is the one that several days later, several of them tried to basically stop the surrender from that was recorded by Hirohito for NHK, recorded on 2 discs. The first one he didn't like, so he recorded a second one. His private guards went ahead and hid that record and stuff in a bunch of paperwork because the people that were trying to take over were trying to find that disc to blow it up because those were the only copies of the emperor in his voice saying that they needed to go ahead and stop hostilities. And it wasn't until the next recording that was made that finally said that he was going to surrender.
I mean, it took him a month, but yeah, I guess like it's one of those that it's like we had the surrender and we accepted less charitable terms. I don't.
The only
why?
Wait, hang on. The charitable terms that we gave them on the end of it to end the war was that he was a figurehead. That's it. Everybody else that was involved in that was supposed to be tried for war crimes. And you go through the list of the people that committed suicide. It's a pretty long list.
Yeah, Bushido. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Right.
So, they took care of the problem. Thank you. We didn't have Nuremberg, but we also then had all the logistics of trying to feed 100 million people without a war going on, which we haven't even touched yet, in trying to get food into Japan.
I mean, that's one of my points is that like we would have been better off trying to do that. I don't know why. Apparently, my whole point hinged on that, but like my point is that we opened a box that we cannot close. That
And it was going to open. It was going to open.
I guess the inevitability means we should do it. I guess. I mean, what inevitability decries that the sun's going to explode. But
yes, it does. But hang on here. Was the bomb going to be invented because the world was the bomb? If World War II doesn't exist, does the atomic bomb get invented? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Correct answer. Because it was already being bantered about by not only the Germans, the Americans. We're going back to the 1920s and 30s here when they were starting to discover not only fission, but that, you know what, if you do a lot of fission at the same time, boom, but you have to do it at the right thing. Now, what is the complexity of an atomic bomb? How hard is it to build one nowadays, today?
I mean, I've heard you say it's easier than building a cell phone. I'll take your word for it. I honestly have never tried, so I don't know.
Your timing in a car engine is very close to the timing that you need for an atomic bomb.
Okay. I mean, I've never built one. I have no idea. But like,
I can't say that I have.
Like building an A bomb is not like building a nuclear weapon is not a difficult thing. The hard part is getting your hands on what you need.
Which actually is not even that.
It's right
nowadays. Back then,
it really isn't that hard. Like
the reason
I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't need to be on another list.
the Japanese. The big problem with the Japanese was they couldn't get enough enriched uranium and build the centrifuges fast enough. The Germans were on the path of that, but then we bombed their heavy water plant in Norway during World War II, which pretty much stopped their atomic bomb development, and they started going towards other weapons. So once again, though, if you're saying that we don't have a responsibility to feed them, which is what I saw a couple people come up and say, we don't have a responsibility to feed them, do we stop at the door and say, okay, hey, we kicked you back. Have a nice day. We're done. What is the end of World War II for you, Hodey?
What is the end?
Yeah, how does the war end?
I think I think non-interventionism. I think we preach peace. I think we practice peace. I don't think we even need to feed people. I just think we take care of our business here and hope that that's a good example for the rest of the world. And I think the thing is, when we crack something like that, killing innocent people in mass, when you begin that, I don't know when that ends. And as a foreign policy, it really has not. And that is kind of my main issue, is that World War II hasn't ended in a policy of killing innocent people in mass. And it was kind of started by this nuclear bomb.
Hang on here. Whoa, rewind.
Wait, I'm going to surprise Brian here. Like, I'm totally going to surprise Brian here. And while I understand what you're saying, Hodey, the reality is, at the time, and given that you had like the Allies and the Axis powers and like everything else that was going on, like it was so far beyond just us, and we were kind of pulled in. Like, we couldn't really avoid it. Now, I think that we could.
We could have, but it would have been terrible.
By the time we got to where we were with Japan, like we were in, right? Like it was what it was. And, you know, there's Pearl Harbor and so you can't, in my, like the way I see it, you can't look back and say, well, we should have never done anything at all because we were there. Like, you can't undo that, right? Today, going forward, I am very much a non-interventionalist. Like, we never should have been in the Middle East for the last 20 years. All of this, never building it's a recreational McNuke, by the way.
I like the recreational plutonium. Just don't ask what's in the fridge. Please continue.
But I don't think, like, that just sounds very black and white. Like, you either do nothing or you bomb them, or you attempt to feed them and fail, or you bomb them. And I just think that if you go back, and we're not, you know, the political and military analysts of the time that were in the White House, that were in the Pentagon making these decisions, right? Or in theater making these decisions. Like, so, but the reality is there were probably almost definitely several other potential options to explore.
Yeah.
And that is where I say the nuke shouldn't have been on the table at that point. There was, like, you can't say, like, we just ignore or throw some rice at them. Like, It wasn't going to work that way. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But that and nuke isn't the only answer. We live in a world of nuance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob's favorite word.
We call him Captain Nuance. Anyway.
Captain Nuance.
I like
that. He really will. So like that's where I get frustrated is when I hear this argument. It's very black and white, but it's not. It never was.
No.
It never was. And if you actually get to the core of the culture of the people of Japan, it truly has not changed. It truly has. The core of their culture has not changed. They are intensely loving. They are intensely traditional. They are intensely protective. And there's a lot of things, right? And over a period of time and a course of events from, being led by this awful emperor, that culture led them down this path, right? And if you look at them today, their culture truly has not changed. What changed is their shift away from that particular leader and those circumstances, right? And so we could go back and analyze probably a dozen other options to pivot those circumstances in a way that didn't murder and vaporize a bazillion children in an instant, but also didn't equal another 100 million deaths over a long period of time. Like, it's not black and white. It's not either or. But what I can tell you is it never had to be a nuclear bomb.
I disagree, because the reason being is that looking at what was facing not only the United States, but China, Russia, all these other countries, that a land invasion was going to be horribly worse for everyone involved. World War II whacked about 3% of the world population. And that's 75 million. So if we knock that number up to another 30 million, we've knocked out a good 5% of the population and about 30%, probably 15 to 30% of the Japanese population. I don't see how that's a good thing. I don't see how war is a good thing. I'm not sitting here rooting for it. I'm never going to root for war, but I am going to root to when something starts like this. Unfortunately, you have the most effective way to end it. You end it, unfortunately. And that's not saying you drone strike a wedding. That's not saying that you drone strike. This wasn't a children's conference that unfortunately they dropped these bombs on. They were military centers of a shipyard and of armament manufacturing that happen to be in these towns. And that sucks. It would be great that if every military built a base like Pendleton and had 30 miles of space around it to say bomb here, but please don't bomb our people around us. But logistically, it doesn't work, because it ends up being like Area 51, where you have to fly everybody in every day. Logistically, that's very tough to do and to keep civilian employees. And Lou, I'm sure you know that as well. People live on off-base housing. They live close to the base. Why? They don't want to drive 2 hours each way to get to the base.
Yeah.
So that's just a reality of it.
Well,
we
just to wrap up here, because we're almost done with our first segment. My final thoughts is I do not like the precedent that set for the American government. I don't like what's happened going forward. I think we should have accepted the first terms of surrender. I understand that people are evil. I wouldn't nuke Yemen because of the starvation that's happening there. I wouldn't nuke Iran because of the starvation that they're carrying out. I think there are instances where it's horrifying, and maybe a nuke would alleviate it, but I don't trust the government to do that calculus, is my point. And I think that, obviously I had different information than you, Brian, and I trust that that's just, it happens. I don't think either one of us are necessarily like cherry picking. I just think it's, when you go down the list of info, there's a lot to sift through. I was trying, but it's a lot to sift through. And I just, I found the quotes that resonated with me. Obviously, I was like, hey, if 7 of the 8 5-star military generals seem to think it wasn't necessary, maybe they're onto something. And of course, you have other information as well. Like, I think for me, if it's 50-50 like that, I'm going to err on the side that doesn't involve killing 250,000 people instantly. And I'm going to go, as Lou said, just with something else. But I understand that if it was a contributing factor and maybe you got to do something really bad for something good to come of it, if that did bring about the end of the war, then that is something worth talking about. You know, if it's something that we're looking at 400,000 starving people, it does make us want to view how we view. We're kind of viewing it right now with like the Taliban taking back over in Afghanistan with us pulling out. Like, it's a negative, but is it a necessary negative? Should we have stayed there just because it was the lesser evil? That's why we have these debates. You know, that's why we talk. But yeah, anyway, let's go ahead. I'm going to take a brief break and we're going to go into the Piece of My Mind segment. Thank you so much for hanging on, everybody. Piece of My Mind segment. Now that all that filthy nuking people stuff is out of the way, because that's no fun, we get to talk about the real good stuff. I will begin. And this is one, I got to tell you, I am actually big on the term social justice. I enjoy social justice. I like it. I think that social progression is great. I think it's great when we can call people what they deserve to be called, when they're treated with respect. But I think part of being in this movement, and I've had this be a piece of my mind before, but this was a really bad week to be a social justice warrior. There were 3 major instances, and I'm going to try to recall them all. I should have written them down beforehand. One was the guy, I don't know if you saw this at the Rockies game, and I'm a big Rockies fan, yelling Dinger. He was looking for the mascot, Dinger, and he yelled it a couple of times, and everybody heard it, and for some reason thought he was shouting the N-word. And there was a black individual at the plate. And the MLB issued an apology. The Rockies issued an apology. All the announcers announced their disgust. People were saying, we're so sorry you had to hear that. Oh my goodness, this is whatever. And then as you break it down, and it's funny because my friends and I, as Rockies fans, we saw this kind of before it became national news. But you know, we saw it kind of when it first started to break, is we're like, I think he's waving at the mascot. Like, I think that's the guy there waving at the mascot. Oh, I think he's saying Dinger. Now, in fairness, from far away, and it's a stadium, you're not sitting right next to him, it is hard to hear what is being said. I understand people that thought it might have been the N-word. But you basically called for like sanction these. we called for like canceling this dude and like killing him. And there were people who went way over the top with it. And like, let's find out where he lives first and kill him. And then it was like, oh, he was just trying to wave down the mascot. Like, that's a rough one. And it's okay to be like, hey, maybe our trigger for outrage is just a little too ready. Like, maybe we're just a little too ready to cancel and axe somebody. Like, maybe it's time to just take a break, take a moment, take a deep breath. The other one that happened this week was white people are not racist if they decide they don't want to wash their children every day. Now, here's the thing. There's a good point to be made here. There is a totally valid social justice point to be made here, is that if a black person says, I don't wash every day, they're assumed to be gross. They deal with this burden that because of the color of their skin, that they're gross or greasy or oily or disgusting or even just dark, and they're dirty, right? And so they have this burden that's placed on them that a lot of people don't understand. However, the goal of social justice is not to bring white people down so that they experience injustice. It's to bring everybody else up so that everyone is experiencing social justice. So when you say that a white couple is being racist for admitting they don't wash their kids every day, you are hurting the cause big time in kind of a big way. And like, it is important to call this out, because otherwise people who work hard for social justice are going to be lumped in with these weirdos, right? Who are like, oh, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis are racist, or Dak Shepard is racist because he doesn't shower every day. It's like, well, that's not it. Like, there's a problem here, but the problem isn't, okay, who gets called racist? Like, that's what we're trained right now, right? Like, who's the racist? It's no. We need to bring people up. The idea isn't to bring other people down. There's some people who deserve to be brought down, believe me, right? But they're not one of them. And so the issue is you can't, like, if you're just constantly going off about like, oh, friggin' Westboro Baptist Church, which is a good thing to go off about, by the way, or, you know, politicians, great thing to go off on, by the way. But if you're constantly going off about this and then you stay silent, or you are actually part of the problem, when you know, a white couple says, oh yeah, we wash our kids whenever they're dirty, then people aren't going to trust what you say, because they're going to say, oh, well, this person is just going to attack everything on that side. And so they don't really have a scope. They don't have a target. They don't have a goal. And it's important for us to kind of understand those goals. I'm having a tough time remembering my third social justice weird oddity of the week, but I think those two will suffice. The thing is it's important. Luke, go ahead.
Okay, like as a mom, and I'm sure Brian can totally relate to this one, okay?
I don't even know what you're going to say, but I'm probably going to agree wholeheartedly, please.
Okay, so like there's several aspects, right? Like, I don't wash my kid every day. Let me give you the reasons why. Because the doctors and everything I've ever been told and what I understand from nursing school and in general, just knowing my kid, if I wash her every day, her skin dries out. She gets like that itchy, bumpy, like it's not good for her skin. It is a scientific fact. Okay. Sometimes I'm freaking tired. I work all day and my kids run me ragged and I'm like, oh my God, we'll do it tomorrow. Okay. That's two. Oh, and the other one, and like I know the argument has kind of gone back and forth, like whether it's washing your kids or washing yourself. And if you don't wash yourself every day, well, okay, I'm gonna go real lefty on the lefties here. That's ableist, right? If I have a disability, if I'm suffering with depression and I don't want to get out of bed, and you're like, oh, you're a racist now because you know. Fuck off. Like, I'm sorry. This is the dumbest shit. As a lefty,
right,
as a social justice warrior.
Right. Yeah.
Fuck right off.
Right.
Okay, that's all I got.
I like it. I mean, it hurts the cause and people don't realize it. Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Ready? Ditto.
Okay.
Holy shit, we agreed on something. It's amazing.
All right. Fantastic.
It is absolutely ridiculous. This is one of those things that where I think people are just looking to be offended. And
I also have 5 people in my house and 1 shower.
Yeah,
and we all have busy schedules, so we get in when we can.
Yeah, and just, you know, just life and stuff like that. It's like, you know what? If this sounds like this more sounds like an ad for big water and big government.
Big water. I love it. Don't tell Flint.
So yeah, yeah. Big water says you need to shower every day or you're racist.
Right. Oh, no. But then we start showering every day and then we're elitists, which again makes us racist. So
yeah,
this whole thing is fucking stupid.
And you're and you're not environmentally friendly. Because come on, I mean, this not taking a shower, I guess, would be the most environmentally friendly thing you can do because you're using probably 15, 20.
Right. What happens in like California and Arizona and out west where there's like you have to conserve water and please shower every other day? Like,
Christy, we appreciate that. We did not need to know.
Aw, I don't shower every day either.
Neither do I.
Mostly because I'm freaking tired. Okay, I'm tired. I didn't shave my legs for like 2 years. Thank you, COVID. Now, notice I said 2 years, and it's only been like 18 months.
Yeah, the last 6 months of normal society wasn't great either. I mean, it was
yeah.
Anyway, that's all I had was like, and it's funny that I've brought this up a couple times before. And the thing is a lot of times when people bring this up, it's just to make social justice warriors look stupid. Like 9 times out of 10 that you see somebody share this, like, look at this idiot lefty talking about how, you know, Ashton Kutcher is a racist because he doesn't shower his kids every day. It's like, it's made to make the left look stupid, right? My point is, though, like, if you ever want, like, social justice is important, social progression is important, self-empowerment is important, and people feeling honored is important. And I do feel like we need a lot of respect for that. and that's why, like, I feel like it's important to call out these times, because 9 times out of 10, I'm on the other side, right? Like, I'm calling out, like, oh my gosh, this guy is like being a gross racist, or this guy's being an anti-Semite, but the thing is if you don't also be like, okay, guys, hang on. Like if you're one of the BLM people that were like, it's cool to rob a Target because you made BLM look really bad, when really Black lives really matter. Like, they really matter. And so it's like, I think the thing is that if you care about your own cause, you do some self-policing. I don't consider this as attacking the left. I consider this as self-policing, to be like, okay, yeah,
totally agree.
Okay.
I'm totally with you. And I'm half joking about the Target thing, but I hear this stuff like, oh, you need to shower your kids, that makes you racist. You know, I want to be like, cops shooting Black men for reaching for the ID they asked for. That's racist.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
It's not Susie for being too tired to wash your freaking kid at night. Like,
yeah. And also, kids
we have more important shit.
Yeah. Kids don't shop up from Target. They have one of the scariest security systems. Everything. Facial recognition, voice recognition, gait recognition.
Yeah.
Just, don't steal from Target, kids.
Yeah.
Steal from Walgreens and like, no.
Walgreens is probably getting there.
They were really great about recording each other.
So easy to steal. Like, everybody between the age of like 10 and 15 swiped a scrunchie. Like, everyone I know at some point.
Yeah. But just as long as you don't steal apples, we're all good.
Right.
Right. Because we'll murder you for some freaking apples.
What I love about like the Target thefts was you had everybody that would bust in, and then there'd be like 3 people on their phone, just like, check out all the people like robbing the Target. I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Like, I've never robbed a place, but I feel like I could do, but I feel like I understand that that's a faux pas. I'm just going to throw that out there. Anyway, Brian, let's have a piece of your mind.
Piece of my mind is really simple, and it's a very popular topic. Vaccinations. Here we go. I am pro-vaccination. But that's my choice. And that's the beautiful thing about this country, is that in most cases it is a choice. Now, don't get me wrong, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I am not doubting the effectiveness of COVID, of its mortality, of how much of an impact it has on people. My personal recommendation is that the Moderna shot seems to be the most long-lasting, and that at this point, it's as many doses that we have in and the number of side effects we're seeing, probably pretty safe to get it. That being said, we have more than 50% of the population in Indiana already vaccinated. We probably have about another 10-15% that have antibodies. If you have antibodies and you've had the vaccine, it's pretty much the same thing. Now, yes, we are seeing people that are getting COVID second and third time, and those are interesting things to study. We're seeing breakthrough cases. Those are also interesting things to study. But the whole idea that everyone has to be vaccinated, that we have to wipe the scourge off the planet, especially where people have already either had COVID or have adverse reactions to COVID, is ludicrous. It's not based in science at all. It's not based on any single piece of any medical history other than we think it's the right thing to do, which, wow, surprise, coming from the government. But once again, we're seeing companies, all these other kind of quasi-government corporations saying, yeah, we're going to go towards a vax pass. Yeah, you should be deeply concerned about that. I just love the hypocrisy of your healthcare and your information is private and protected, and you have a right to privacy, except when it comes to this one shot. And we don't care if you've had COVID or can't get vaccinated because of the adverse reactions you have. We have to know if you got the shot or not to be able to participate in society. Again, they're going about this the worst way possible, and surprises government. So it's a pretty good libertarian stuff, although I'm pretty sure that I've offended a few people by saying that I got the shot and I'm for it. So fire away.
I'm very much in agreement with you here. Get it if you want it, you feel you need it. Mm-hmm. Don't if you're questioning or have doubts. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Science is hard, right? And this is new, and there's a lot of conflicting information. So I completely understand the hesitation. or to want to sit back and go, I want to watch and kind of see how things play out for a bit, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm pro-vax, like my kid's vaccinated for stuff. I'm vaccinated, but like I kind of like pump the brakes, read a bunch of stuff, and then wait and see what's happening. Like, there's nothing wrong with taking your time, particularly on this. And, and I've said it before, like, it's my life motto. And I have to thank my former boss, Marissa. Like, this was a constant, like, literally one of the first things she said to me when she hired me was basically the only rule is don't be a dick. And I was like, this is a great place for me. So, but that's my life motto, truly, is don't be a dick, right? So if I'm not vaccinated or I have a little bit of a cough, I know it's allergies because I'm allergic to like everything that blooms, right? Yeah. But I'm not going to go up to people and be like, hey, how are you? Like, because I'm not an asshole. Like, right? Exactly. Like, I'm not going to do that. I also work in a field where I am constantly sterilizing and cleaning and things like that. So I'm very aware of that. I have to study and be certified for like understanding and preventing bloodborne pathogen transmission and things like that. So like, I get it, and I'm cautious, and I try to be as like, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm tired when I can't think of a word. I just want to be nice, like considerate. That's the word. Considerate of people around me. Just as long before this existed, I'm a smoker, right? Like I'll smoke cigarettes. I really enjoy my cigarettes. But I'm not one of those smokers that gets like shitty about people not liking my cigarette smoke. Like I don't know. Like I don't know you. I'm going to step as far away as I can. I'm going to blow it away from you. If the wind takes it towards you, I apologize. I'm so sorry. Let me move. Like you didn't ask to smoke my cigarette, right? Like, but again, and this goes back to Japan. I grew up in a country where even if it was just cherry blossom season, so you had the sniffles, you put on a mask to go to freaking work. That was the culture because we were considerate, right? Like everyone on the train every single day wore a mask. Like that's just what you do. You didn't have to. No one expected you to. It was just sort of this understood, if you're going to be around a bunch of old people today, wear a mask just in case, be considerate. And that's it. That's it. It's not that freaking hard, Yeah. So I'm with you. And I don't like the idea of like a vax pass or like limiting people's transportation or ability to travel or participate in public stuff. Like it weirds me out a little bit. But at the same time, like I really wish people would be more considerate. Like I just want to put up a sign like don't be a dick.
My favorite part of the whole thing was that some of the places are saying, well, you should just use your smartphone and order groceries and you can pick them up. That way you don't have to go into the store. Then you won't need a Vax Pass. Well, wait a minute here. I have to have a smartphone now and a smartphone plan to get groceries.
Sounds elitist.
Just a little. That's your photo ID? Oh, God, no.
Oh, no. Well, you need an ID, but unless it's for voting.
Yeah, then yeah, somehow it's perfectly fine.
Right. And then if we talk about disparate outcomes, right? I mean, who are the people that are least vaccinated right now? I mean, and not to be just not to even just pull the race card, healthcare workers have a pretty low vaccination rate right now.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really been watching.
So like there's a lot of disparate outcomes and not just racist, although also racist, disparate outcomes from mandating these certain things that we're trying to do. And all of a sudden you kind of say like, we're back to the age where it's like, no, I'm banning crack because it's bad for you, but I'm not banning extra large, Cokes, even though that's also bad for you because
Chicago did.
That's a white people problem and that's a black people problem. Well, Chicago's got all problems. But then, but there's, okay. So like, I will qualify this by saying two things. One, if it's a public organization, they should never, ever, ever, ever be able to discriminate. So that's just right off the bat there. And if you say, well, what about this? Well, then that's probably a good reason why it needs to be a private organization. Because if it's public, at the very minimum, should never be able to discriminate. Number two, I am also opposed to any kind of public official vaccine passport thing. However, I do struggle with this. If I support somebody's right not to bake the cake, right? And I don't like it. Mm-hmm. But if I say you don't have to bake the cake, if you also go out there and say, I don't want to serve unvaccinated people, I don't love that either. Yeah. But I do think it's a right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not fun, but like it is,
it's one of those things that gets down to personal choice in the end. And if I choose that, you know what, I don't want a bunch of apologizing for 5-year-olds stealing from an apple cart, atom bomb people coming into my business, I can put that sign up. Now, don't be surprised if people go, well, he's limiting these people. What else? It gets back to Lou's point. Don't be a dick. But the problem is a lot of people have a different definition of what being a dick is. So, and
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, Lou, why don't you close us out with a piece of your mind?
Mm-hmm. Lou lost audio, apparently.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
I like looking at her pretty face anyway.
And consternation. What the hell just happened? Oh, she just went away.
We'll see her soon.
Yep, we'll see her soon. The funny thing is that all of the COVID, it's like COVID security theater that goes on nowadays. And I'm going to be really interested 5-7 years from now, hopefully when this is over, for people to do regressive studies and find out that probably mask mandates were pretty much useless, especially with cloth masks. N90, if you're really going to do it, make them wear N95s. But that the reality is that being inside is the worst thing for COVID. Being outside in the sunshine and things like that is the best thing to prevent COVID.
So you're saying arresting those surfers was not one of the best things we could have done?
I just love it because every. But the thing is, this gets back to where the government's being incredibly dense. It's like, we want people to be outside. No, I don't want them licking their hands and shaking hands and doing stuff like that. But you know what? If they do, they understand the risk. I just feel like the movie Airplane, where the guy's sitting there going, they bought their tickets. They knew what they're going into. Let them crash.
Right.
It's going to be fun. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I think the thing is I think the tough thing is government involvement is hard because I think everything is touched in some degree by government, some more than others, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It is hard when it's something like social media because I can't have this, I want to say this purist mentality. It's their platform. They do what they want.
Right.
But they do so much of it's our platform, and then it's like, and it's public platform, and it's just like, oh man, this all sucks.
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Oh, that's okay. You probably didn't want to anyway.
Yeah,
that's great.
But Hodey, I think the big thing there is the minute that you start taking directions from the government, can't hear us. Sorry,
I got nothing.
Oh, the minute you start taking directions from the government means that you are basically that you've become an arm of the government. There's some things to say, hey, look, we don't want you to have a as long as you get your Obama phone. It's one thing to say we don't want you using this side of the street over here as your entrance from the government. We want you to use this over here because for some reason it makes more sense. Okay. It's another thing to be like, you know what? Here's 17 people we don't like very much. We think you ought to look into their histories. It's like sicking the IRS on political people who go up and question Obama, Biden, anybody else. Yeah. If you're using political power, if you're using your political power to affect someone's private life, it better be criminal in nature. And I mean, it's either criminal that you're doing the investigating or what you're doing is criminal. So, Lou, can you hear us?
I'll take that as a resounding no.
Yeah.
No? Oh, I'm sorry, Lou. You want to talk? I'm trying to sign language to her. Do you want to say?
All right, guys. Can you hear me? Okay. So considering I can't hear anything else that's happening, I'm gonna wing it. So is it my turn for the piece of my mind? I love this is the most awkward thing ever. Although I should be used to it. Are we dancing? That's oh my wait. So is this what I have to do to like make you guys do really embarrassing stuff on camera? Because this is great. We're recording, right? Like this is fantastic. No, I wanted to be pretty quick about the piece of my mind today, and it is sort of related to what Brian was talking about as far as like medical stuff goes and vaccines. I came across a conversation earlier today, and I think Hodey saw me flip out on Facebook this morning about it. And there was this discussion about how, you know, vaccines are fake news and polio was never eradicated. And it's just been renamed Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I wanted to run my head into a brick wall. And I can see that Brian is thinking the exact same thing that I am. You know, and when I was scratching my head and trying to be like, wait, what are you talking about? And a lot of these, you know, and of course that, well, research it yourself. And here's this video on YouTube. Like, okay, that's really all I need to know, but okay. And first, a lot of the resources that they were talking about said things having to do with third world countries that do still have polio. You know, when we talk about polio being eradicated, we are talking about here in America, not a third world country, right? And so that's the first sort of like straw man that they like to use. And then when they continue to talk about Guillain-Barré syndrome and they list a couple other things and what they're doing is they're comparing a paralytic symptom that is similar or the same across a handful of different things and saying, well, it's the same. And I'm laughing to myself. And then of course there's why isn't there a vaccine for Guillain-Barré? Because it's not a virus. It's an autoimmune nervous system response. Like, and as someone who like dealt with Guillain-Barré for like a year, and I have other autoimmune diseases, like, you don't, oh God, you know, one of the comments said something to the effect of like, well, demyelination is demyelination, talking about the sheath that basically protects your nerves, right? And when that sheath gets damaged, you have all kinds of issues, pain, paralysis, neuropathy, etc. Something I have dealt with for many, many years. And it is a symptom or a response to, and it can be, you can have a virus that triggers this response. You can have a trauma that triggers this response. You can have a hereditary, oops, you're shit out of luck that triggers this response, right? But there's nothing actually viral in, like, you cannot test for GBS in the blood. Like, it's not viral. They do a spinal tap and like muscular and nerve biopsies, which I have had, and they are god awful. Some of the most painful tests I've ever been through in my life. And meanwhile, a test for something like polio, which is a virus, is tested in the blood. And it's terrifying to me that there are people out there who are the numbers, because this was like some big politician who posted something and it was hundreds of responses that really truly believe this stuff. And it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. In the same way I look at that, the same way as I look at people like Green, what's her name? Green in Congress or whatever. I mean, she's absolutely batshit crazy. Like,
Marjorie
how
Taylor
did you
Greene.
get in this position when you believe some of the wackadoo shit you believe? It's terrifying. Yes, leprosy still exists in a lot of places. In fact, leprosy still exists quite commonly in Central and South America, and even in some parts of the southern US, because it is a virus that does not have a specific vaccine and can be spread via armadillos. One of my favorite animals. And it's just really unfortunate because I want to pick them all up and hug them. Okay, I'm going to stop talking because I don't know what you're saying. And so I'm going to let you talk.
All right. Well, I mean, first of all, like, I can't believe that there are actually people that like think that because the symptom is the same, the diagnosis is the same. I mean, like, you can watch an episode of House and like the joke is what they think everything is that one disease.
Lupus.
Lupus. Lupus. Yeah, everything's lupus, right? All the symptoms sound like lupus, right? So like I just looked up offhand rashes, and there's like 68 different causes for rashes. Like, so it doesn't make any sense that somebody would think that
I have lupus, so that's awesome to me.
Oh, there you go. Everybody has lupus, apparently. No, I'm kidding. But there's a million different causes for these things. Like there's 68 different causes for a rash, and some of them you have a cream, some of them you have a pill, some of them can't be cured, some of them are like hereditary. Like, that's just I don't know. It strikes me as common sense. So I think the reason I was surprised at it, Lou, when you mentioned it, and apparently you can hear me now, which is cool. But I was surprised when you mentioned it is because I was like, are there actually people that are still like this? Like, this is. Like, who believes this? Oh, I'm on the phone. Okay, sweet. Like, I can't believe there are actually people that believe like this. I don't know. It blows my mind.
There's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of people that are convinced that 5G makes the frogs gay and therefore makes my kids gay. So of course they're going to believe that if yes. Oh my God, grandma lost her leg. It's definitely polio. Or, it's like she lost feeling if she got the vaccine. It's definitely polio. They're injecting you with polio. I mean, there's a bunch of stupid people out there. The best way to deal with stupid people is to not make them stupid people. The best way to deal with asshole stupid people is just generally mocking them or just basically giving them an open door to say, maybe stop being an asshole, maybe stop being stupid. But again, it still falls down into the end of 80% of humanity is kind of on board with this. They realize that Guillain-Barré is a real syndrome and it's not polio.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't get it. So
it strikes me as strange that people would even say that. But like you said, there are people who think the 5G is making the frogs gay. So I guess
the funny thing about the 5G, I'm going to go on my little techno rant here.
Hit me.
If you are convinced that 5G is altering our DNA, take a look at the frequency that it operates at. Then I want you to go over to your microwave and take a look at the frequency it operates at. If the frogs are gay, it's because you've been making too much microwave popcorn.
That's funny. Well, with Lou having audio issues and this being what it is, I think now's about a good time to wrap up. But I appreciate everybody for joining us today. I appreciate the strong feelings demonstrated here, Brian. I still love you, buddy. Barely. Buddy. But I mean,
hey, my bomb, my choice.
Right, yeah. Your bomb, your choice. Good point. But yeah, I just I appreciate the thoughts, and I hope we gave everybody a lot to think about. I'm glad for your input as well, Lou, and for having my side, which is the correct side. Till the very end there, where you gave Brian a bone, that was unnecessary. But I'm going to try not to hold that against you as much as I can. Anyhow, guys, thank you both for joining us. Everybody for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Love you all very much. Mwah.